This is Talking Law on Radio 97 with Despina Prialo from Prialo Legal. And if you have a question, anything to do with the law, big or small questions, Despina happy to answer them. All you need to do is drop them in an email to breakfast97 at superradionetwork.com.au. That's our new email address, breakfast97 at superradionetwork.com.au.
Lovely. So right now we're talking about the top 10 vital things you probably don't know about buying or selling property. So we've gone through about 5 crucial points, 5 more to go. And the next one up is, if you have a tenant in your property and sell, what happens if the tenant breaks the lease?
That could be a problem.
Yeah.
Because if you have sold a property disclosing there's a tenant to the buyer, and the buyer is buying that property with the expectation that there'll be a tenant, and you disclose, of course, when the tenancy ends. So then the buyer thinks, okay, I'm settling on this date. There's 1 month or 2 months or 6 months left of the tenancy. Fantastic. I'm going to collect rent.
Yep.
Exactly. And they're happy to buy on that basis as it was represented, right? So if the tenant breaks the lease, that could be a problem for the seller, because the buyer then says, oh, hang on, I bought a property with this tenant. I could have bought a property around the corner that had another tenancy, but I chose this one because I liked it, and it had a tenancy of 6 months left or 4 months left, or whatever it was.
Could even be a year.
Well, exactly. So that's a problem for the seller, and it'll depend on the circumstances as to how that tenant and why that tenant broke the lease, as to whether this will cause a problem for the seller leading up to settlement and post-settlement in terms of compensation rights that the buyer may have. So it'll depend. You wouldn't want to, as a seller, just allow a tenant to break it willy-nilly, because that's the important point to make. So if the tenant comes to you and says, oh, can I break the lease? For whatever reason, who knows, they want to relocate, they're moving interstate. You can't just go, sure, no problem. You can't do that as a seller, because you've committed under a contract to sell a property with a tenant. So you just have to be very careful there, not just to be too blasé about that. It's often not thought of when you're a seller, that you do have obligations and commitments when you're selling a property with a tenancy.
Yeah, 100%. And commercial property, stamp duty on GST price. What can go wrong here?
Oh, look, a lot. Probably 90.
It's like all of them, so many things.
Well, that's right. This is all about telling people what they probably don't know and what we know and we deal with every day. So this is about telling buyers, it's about their budgets. When you buy a property, you've got a budget in mind, and we take the buyers through, okay, you've got your purchase price, you've negotiated that, not us. You've got to pay so much of deposit up front, that's part of your budget and cash flow. And then there's all these outgoings. What are the costs? What are the outgoings? Stamp duty, when do I have to pay that? And that's another one on the list here. And registration fees to land titles. Stamp duty is a big one to budget, obviously. And stamp duty depends on, are you buying an investment property or are you buying it as your principal place of residence? And if you are buying commercial property, so this is the point here, not residential, commercial, you have to be very careful to look at the GST component. So why do we need to do that? Because if you are buying a property, a commercial property that's GST exclusive, so you have a price, then you've got to pay GST on top, right? You actually pay stamp duty on the GST price, not the actual sale price. Now that could make a big difference between the amount of stamp duty you pay in the end and in terms of your budget. You can imagine that. And I've told buyers this every time we talk about it, obviously, and they go, really? I didn't know that you pay duty on the GST price. It's really like a double tax, isn't it? In Queensland, and that's the way it is. That's the way it is. So you need to know that upfront as part of your budget, right? And a lot of times buyers are not advised of this.
Because that's thousands.
It could be thousands. Could be the difference of, 2,000 to 20,000 or more. Who knows?
Jeez Louise. All right, good to know. Okay, next point is signing paper versus DocuSign, having no witness. What's this about?
Okay, so people are still, I suppose, not understanding correctly, and sometimes it's critical with time restraints and getting that contract signed back, because hot market, so everybody is, wheeling and dealing and negotiating and getting that top price. So just a short point to remember, if you get a contract that's sent to you by DocuSign, okay, here's a contract, sign it. You don't need to run around and find that witness. Okay.
Oh.
No. So if you sign it electronically in an electronic format that's approved, one of them is DocuSign, of course, and that's predominantly used. You just need to sign, as the buyer or seller, for example, the signing page of the contract, because contracts have multiple pages, and you only need to sign once on the signing page electronically, no witness. Versus if someone sends you the contract by email, just say,
Good
here's
old
the
scanner.
contract, that is not an approved electronic format. It has to be done through a software like DocuSign. So if it's sent to you by email by the agent, here it is, it's PDF form or even Word, but that's not often used. Sign the contract. You have to sign every single page. You have to then sign on the signing page per se, you must get it witnessed. Now that will take time if you don't just have someone handy. And of course, scanning back as well takes time. So just remember to understand the important difference there.
Yeah, such a big difference. It's crazy. Do you get a lot of paper forms scanned like that?
Not many, but still it happens. Yeah.
And then they have to sign every single page.
Yes, and what we find too is that not everyone has DocuSign, believe it or not. So some agents aren't set up for that. So we have clients interstate. So we say to the agent, send it to us in the PDF and we will send it to the client via DocuSign.
Making it easy.
Yes.
I love it. All right. This one hardly any buyer knows. Due diligence condition. Can you explain, Despina?
Okay, so this is more from the point of view of stamp duty.
Okay.
So when you sign a contract, you undoubtedly have conditions, okay? But let's go back to the basics. You sign a contract, normally, this is in Queensland, we're talking about New South Wales is 90 days, but normally stamp duty is payable within 30 days, okay? So you know that up front, it's part of your budget. Now, that 30 days can be kicked out if you have conditions. And typically we're talking about conditions where you're relying on a third party, like finance. So it's out of your control. The bank has to give you that approval. So you're talking about finance conditions, and then you could be talking about pest and building. Okay, so when you have conditions like those that are relying on third parties to satisfy, so you've got to get someone to do your pest and building, and then you've got to have the bank to approve your finance. Then stamp duty is not 30 days from the contract date, it can be 30 days from when that condition or the last condition is satisfied. Okay, so then that kicks out your stamp duty when you have to pay. That's important to know from a cash flow point of view if you have a 90-day contract or a 60-day contract. So where it gets a bit tricky is if you have a due diligence clause in your contract and that's reliant upon you, so you have to be satisfied, you're carrying out due diligence, you're having the contract subject to you, the buyer being satisfied. So it's all reliant on you. So if you have that and you don't have any other conditions, so say if you had a contract, put it in perspective, you sign a contract, you've got a 60-day due diligence, and then you've got, say, 120 days settlement date. You know, sometimes that happens. It's negotiated. Your stamp duty is actually payable then within 30 days, not at settlement and not after due diligence, if there's no other conditions.
Yeah, wow.
And it's important to understand that because people get caught out and they don't realise if they don't get that advice up front, oh, I've got to actually outlay the stamp duty within 30 days. Do I? I didn't know that because I had a due diligence condition. Yes, but it doesn't count. What counts is to kick out that stamp duty delay payment date, if I could say it is, other conditions, third-party conditions like finance, like pest and building, not due diligence. So just talk to your lawyer up front before you commit to a contract which may only have due diligence condition only. Yeah.
Good advice then. Alrighty. Time's flying. Oh my goodness. Okay, so this is our last point, but a good one, a juicy one. Unusual search rights. The good old due diligence special condition. And your note here was not included often enough, and it's scary stuff. Why?
It is scary stuff. We had a client recently who went under contract, said to us, look, I definitely want a due diligence. I said, great, let's do it. It was a property up on the Fraser Coast. And luckily for us, we picked up during the due diligence an unusual alert about a possible mining rights and exploration rights. Ooh. So it was a warning that came up, and we then pursued it. We said to the client, look, this has come up. We've seen it with our expertise. We've seen it come up. We should definitely pursue this. And they said, okay, go do it. We did. We conducted further searches, and we actually found mining and exploration rights that existed over this property that was not on title, because those ones are not found on title. And the buyer terminated, luckily, under due diligence because they weren't going to buy a property that had a massive, mining and exploration rights, where the rights under the permit that we saw were actually quite extensive in terms of access to the property, in terms of mining and exploration rights on the land.
Yeah, you certainly don't want to find that out after you've, after you're getting ready to move in, do you?
Oh, absolutely. Or you've already bought it.
You've already
settled on it. And then because you know about it, the thing is that when you sell it, you really should disclose that, you see, to other buyers. You can't mislead them. So that's another interesting point too. So it's about
lying, and it's like the biggest lie ever. Someone knocking your door
Exactly.
going, I'm going to go mine gold now. I'm sorry.
Yes,
That's
yes.
amazing.
Yes, so it was an unusual one,
Yeah.
but the thing is, to take away from this is, if you have someone that doesn't understand that and doesn't have the experience, you wouldn't have had someone pick up the alert and then go make the inquiries for the buyer to then find out that this actually was affecting the land. Very important. So again, experienced person to look after your matters.
And you've just given us 10 good reasons to
Yes.
make sure you find a good lawyer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Great advice there, as always, from Despina Priala, answering all your questions about the law. And if you want to hear any of our Talking Law segments again, you can go on YouTube and just search Priala Legal, Priala. And if people want to get in touch, Despina, where can they go?
Yes, they can phone the office 55291 294, or they can text my mobile 0400 141 269.
Fabulous. And you can also send your questions to us here at Breakfast Radio 97. Our email address is breakfast97@superradionetwork.com.au. Thanks so much again, Despina.
Thank you. See you next week.
See ya.